It's crispy. Writing your very first script can feel like a daunting task, and don't get me wrong, it really is. But it doesn't have to be as terrifying as you might perceive going into it. Before writing a feature film script, I did write a few short film scripts, most of which we did end up shooting, mostly for practice when it came to our production style. And I just want to go over a few of the methods that I adopted along the way, which I found helped me achieve writing my very first feature film screenplay. First thing I did when I decided I wanted to get into screenwriting was read a script of a movie that I was very familiar with. I had seen The Dark Knight so many times that I knew it so well word for word, and I managed to find a screenplay version of the film online. This is pretty easy. You just Google search screenplay for the title of the film that you want to read the script for, and it usually is easy to find. Because I knew the film so well, it made it easy for me to understand the translation from script to screen. Things like actions, parenthetical text, dialogue, scene headings, things like that. Especially when you see certain scenes from films and you're wondering, how did that come off the page? How would you write that out? Once you read the script, it all makes sense. For me personally, I've only written scripts that I intended to shoot myself as a director. There are probably various videos out there for people who focus mostly on just screenwriting with the intention of selling said script to a production company. For me, the films I've directed to date were films that I did write the script for myself. The first time I decided to write a screenplay in a professional format was a short film called Sinking Ships, and I was a bit naive at the time. I did not know there were programs out there that would format the script for you as you're typing. I literally used a Word document, used the tab key, and formatted it, changed the text so that it would resemble a script. Of course, I'd go on to learn about things like Final Draft, Celtex, and of course UMeScript. UMeScript is the platform that I used when I decided to write my first feature film screenplay, Moorehouse Road. Writing short screenplays when you're just getting started is a great idea, even if it's like 5 pages long. Just get in the habit of getting used to the format, of all the different terms used. It doesn't look the same as an essay or a novel. That's why a lot of those programs that I just mentioned are really good to use. They pretty much make it impossible for you to make a mistake when it comes to formatting the screenplay. When you're writing those scripts, it doesn't matter if they're good or bad. Don't even have the intention of shooting them. Just write something basic so that you get familiar with the general flow of how screenwriting works. And I would also say to continue reading screenplays, other people's work, scripts for movies that you like, or even movies you haven't seen, and then go and see said film to see how that script translated to screen. You'll find that there's a lot of differences along the way. Sometimes scripts do change in the shooting phase. Actors improvise lines, the director changes their mind about something, the editor might bring something up. Who knows? The script is never the 100% final version of what you end up seeing. When I decided it was time to write my first feature film screenplay, there's a few things I did during that process which helped me stay focused. Lots of coffee, regular visits to the beach, getting out and having walks and enjoying nature, keep yourself occupied with other activities, and make sure you dedicate a decent amount of time at least once a day to writing said script, even if it's just a page on days you're not feeling up for it. But either way, don't leave too much time in between sessions at the computer typing away. It is very easy to get sidetracked and fall into other patterns. When I wrote Moorehouse Road, the first draft, which was very rough, took about 3 months to get from start to finish. And by rough, I mean rough. There were a lot of areas that needed so much work, but it didn't matter. For my style personally, I like just to get the bulk of it done first, then spend the next few months getting it fine-tuned. After that 3 months, Dave and I would spend the next 12 months refining the script together. This included having a cast script reading with a group of actors. I knew in advance who I wanted to cast for certain roles, so most of the people who would go on to end up in the film were available and participated in the script reading. This was a great way to hear the script out loud by the actors who would mostly go on to play said roles, because it's great to hear people who suit the roles say the lines out loud. It's a good way to know if it sounds natural or not, if it sounds like that character would actually speak like that, and so forth. Plus, you always pick up so many more mistakes when someone else is reading your work back to you. So all in all, Moorehouse Road took about 15 months to write, and that includes the polishing, the rewrites, the changes, the edits. I got to a point where I decided this script was in a place that was ready to go. Sure, I could have spent a lot more time refining certain dialogue, refining certain actions, and really just going over it with a fine-tooth comb. But I told myself that perfection is an illusion and that this would just mean I could be at it for years. I've heard so many stories of people who spend literally 10 to 20 years writing a screenplay because they're on that quest for perfection. I understand this makes sense for a lot of people, but for me, I really wanted to direct and shoot this film and really get started in the production and filmmaking process. I knew the script wasn't going to be the most amazing script in the world, but it didn't matter. This was the first feature film for us, so I just wanted something that was solid enough for us to work with when we went into production. Always be open to feedback, especially when you have that read-through with a cast of actors who could play those roles. It's always good to hear their perspective on things. If you're using actors, a lot of the time, they are people who are themselves very creative, are probably writers too. So therefore they have a lot of input and a lot of ideas on how certain things can work. At the end of the day, actors spend a lot more time with the character than you do, so it's good to hear them out. I would also recommend getting some feedback from people who don't know you or your work very well. Yeah, sometimes our friends and family read our script and just say, it's good, they don't want to hurt our feelings, but it's also a good idea to get some genuine, unbiased feedback. Sometimes we think an idea is fantastic, but then it turns out everyone around us says it's not working, but we so believe in our idea that we go with it anyway, then years later realise maybe it wasn't a great idea, and we think maybe I should have listened to those people. It's hard to know where that balance is between sticking to your goal and being open to suggestions of change. But these are all things that you'll learn along the way when you get writing more. 5 little tips that I would just throw out there for people who are looking at writing either their first feature film or first short film screenplay. The no-brainer, write about what you know and what you're familiar with. Sure, it's okay to explore ideas that you may not necessarily be familiar with. After all, a lot of science fiction films are based on ideas that could never happen, but we've got to write about them somehow, same with fantasy, etc. But I do think that when you're writing a screenplay, it is a good idea to stick with subjects you are familiar with in terms of story, characters, etc. This makes for a much more authentic piece of writing. If you spend 20 years working in a hospital and you're going to write a story about a person who worked in a hospital, you've got a lot of inside information compared to somebody who does not have that same experience, who is also writing a film about the same subject. That being said, always do your research. If there's something that you're not sure about, look into it. Writing Moorehouse Road, I did look into a little bit of medical terms and situations, names of drugs, etc., because I didn't really know too much about the medical field. This film taps into it a little bit. We don't really go full into it in terms of a lot of as far as academics are concerned, but we do brush upon it slightly. Step 2, put your ego aside. Listen to the feedback. You know, as we touched on before, you're going to have ideas that you think are amazing, but the more you spend time thinking about it, you realize maybe those people have a point, maybe there are changes that do need to be made here. A way to do this is step away from your work for a little while. If you're not sure about something or getting feedback about something that's a bit confusing, then I would recommend leaving that material alone for a little while. Come back to it with a fresh perspective. Forget about it for a moment. Focus on something else. Come back to it. You'll have a fresh set of eyes, a fresh mindset. You'll be able to have a clearer understanding on your idea now from an outsider perspective, now that you've detached yourself from it momentarily. And then you'll be able to have a better idea if it's a good or bad or idea that maybe just needs working on. Tip 3, take your time, don't rush. I know saying I wrote a screenplay in 3 months sounds like it's a short space of time, but don't forget I spent the next 12 months refining it as well. The 3 months was basically just to create what I call the skeleton of the screenplay. The scenes, the characters, start, middle, end. Then after that we fill it in with all the other stuff that makes it complete. You're not going to write an amazing screenplay overnight or even in 1 month or 2 months. It is going to take time to get it right. On the flip side of that, don't spend too much time on it. As I said, some people choose to spend years and years and years writing a screenplay, but what if that screenplay never gets made? Sure, they may be proud of their work, and so they should be, and it might get made someday. But I also believe there is so much to be said about just writing non-stop. Write one script, put it aside, write another. Don't spend too much time polishing a rock that may never turn into a diamond. Your ideas are always going to change and grow with you. I recommend choosing a deadline so that you can work towards that. Of course, factor in a contingency plan. After all, things do get in the way, life gets in the way, right? But it's easy to focus on all the little things. I could easily still be writing Moorehouse Road to this day if it wasn't for the fact that we decided just to pick a point where the script was okay enough for us to shoot. Otherwise, we would still be writing it and we wouldn't have jumped into production. Our actors have moved on to other things. You know? Number 4, be prepared to make sacrifices. As I said, it's going to be difficult to be able to focus on writing a script and complete a script in a relatively short space of time. I'm talking 1 to 2 years. If you've always got things coming along, holidays, work, family, friends, commitments, other hobbies, it's so easy to get sidetracked by other things. Sometimes we do need to say, you know what, this week I'm not going to be going out all the time. I'm going to sit at home and just write. Maybe I won't go on that holiday later this year. I'll spend that time at home writing and working on my script. Unfortunately, you can't have your cake and eat it too. To achieve that first script, especially if it's a feature film script, you will need to sacrifice a bit of your spare time. Sure, still work in all the fun stuff, go out with friends, watch your favourite shows, go on holidays, but make sure you also factor in that this is important. This is just as important as those things if you take it that seriously, and you've got to treat it with that level of importance. Tip number 5 is give yourself a break. Don't expect a masterpiece the first time. As I said, you could spend so much time just focusing on the one script for years and years and years, and then at the end of it, have just an okay script to show for it. You know, you're not going to achieve the most amazing screenplay the first time round you try to do this. I mean, unless you're an absolute writing genius and you fluke it. You know, a lot of us are very new at this. We're still getting used to how all this works. So it's important to make sure that we give ourselves a break. We're not going to achieve that amazing dream on the first go. We will one day, but we've got to make a few mistakes first. Make as many mistakes as you can today so that you can have a better product tomorrow. What's that saying? You got to break a few eggs to make an omelette. Same thing. I watch Moorehouse Road now and I think, you know, I'm proud of it, but I hope it's not the best film I ever make. In fact, I hope that I look back on it one day and have achieved something better by then. It was my first time as a feature film writer and director, and I want to make sure I do better each time. It's the same with writing or music or any kind of arts or creative process. You want to do better each time, so you can't expect that perfect result on the first try. Make those mistakes, write those bad scripts, make those bad short films. We've all got to do it, we've all got to learn somehow. Just get creative and keep going with it. Enjoy the mistakes, enjoy the bad writing, learn from it, grow from it. Like I said earlier, perfection, in my opinion, is an illusion. It's not achievable. We can work our hardest to get as close to it as possible, but it's always going to be a little bit out of reach. Our idea of perfect is not someone else's idea of perfect. So just work with your idea of perfect. Write your script, work in all those techniques, and do your absolute best. I was once a 16-year-old with a video camera who decided to start writing a screenplay on Microsoft Word document, thinking that this was going to be a feature film that I was going to shoot in the next few weeks and it was going to go on to cinemas worldwide. Well, of course that didn't happen, and that very rarely happens. But thanks to time, practice, and just keeping at it, I was able to achieve some level of success in the recent years. Moorehouse Road, as I said, is not the perfect script. But for me as a first-time writer-director of a feature film, it was perfect for me. That's all that matters at the end of the day. Write the stories that you want to tell. Thanks so much for watching. Just a heads up that I was recently interviewed on a podcast, the Reborn Pictures Podcast, which I'll put a link in the description down below, where I do talk about the making of our film, Moorehouse Road, and our journey of shooting right up until distribution through Film Hub. And thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.